Good evening, and welcome to the Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy. Today is September 5th, 2018. And everyone on the news is talking about the hearing for Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, the nominee for the Supreme Court. And they're, as usual, much ado about nothing, trying to make a big circus out of the whole vetting and confirming process. I think he will end up being the nominee, so that's really another tempest in a teapot. It's all about distraction, keeping the American public distracted, keeping those headlines coming, bringing the ad revenue and the revenue into the various media outlets. As Trump has said more than once, the media should be grateful that he is president, because every day, almost every day, he generates ad revenue and he puts eyeballs on that video screen, on that television. He puts ears against radios. He is here to shake things up, and that is what he is doing. As we look at how his presidency has developed, we have to notice one important change in Trump, a way that Trump is different. And this is only one way that he's different, but it's a significant way. And mostly with a politician, you will see that the politician talks a good game, very smooth, very slick, makes big promises, and then doesn't follow through. Knows exactly what to say with the focus groups, with the practice, with the speechwriters, reading the teleprompter, and saying the exact thing, sounding presidential. But in terms of actions, maybe not so much. With Trump, it's the exact opposite. He goes all over the place in his speeches, goes off the teleprompter, rants and raves, is not in control, so it appears. So he appears not to be in control. He actually is, but he appears not to be. And constantly is befuddling and puzzling and shocking and appalling to his opponents, and seems to delight in his ability to shock his opponents and to be un-PC. For those who are maybe of the oldest generation, they may not understand what that political correctness is an important part of today's society. So Trump is the opposite of your average politician. Remember, Trump is really not a politician. He is a celebrity. He's a public figure. He's a playboy, or used to be a playboy, a fairly notorious playboy, womanizer. But he's never really been a politician, not a paid professional politician. But I think he's learned a lot in his long life. He's pretty old for a president, way older than Barack Obama was when he came into office, or George W. Bush. And if he stays the whole 8 years, he'll be something like 78, 79, something like that, almost 80 years old. So right up there with Reagan. Now Reagan, of course, as we know, most of his second term, he really almost, they say Reagan almost slept through his second term. After he got shot, or after the assassination attempt, I'm not really sure if it was a bullet that hit him. I've heard other stories about this, about what actually the object was that actually penetrated into Reagan's body. He was definitely shot with something, but whether it was a bullet from the gun of the young man who came from a family that was close friends with the Bushes, by the way, whether or not he was actually shot with that that young guy's bullet, that's a question that's always been muddied by the media. But anyway, yeah, so Trump is a guy who's the opposite of your average politician. He talks much differently than a politician normally does. But he makes it a point of honor to try very hard to accomplish all of his promises that he made on the campaign trail. And he knows that he has to, because the people who voted for him expect this from him. And they are willing to turn against him if he does not deliver on his promises. And there are some people, and I think of Ann Coulter particularly, who supported Donald Trump, but who are disappointed with him because he has not accomplished as much on the wall, the border between the United States and Mexico, as she had hoped, as she had expected, as he promised. So that's a sticking point for her, and I think that her softening her view on, but she was getting very critical of Trump. And this is the opposite of what a newspaper like the New York Times says, that nothing can shake the loyalty of the Trump supporters to their president. No matter what he does. I mean, there's been several articles in the New York Times, about this, that nothing, whatever happens, all these scandals do not shake their faith in President Trump. But there's a reason for that, and it's very obvious. To the Trump supporters, these scandals are not that important. I mean, hush money to old girlfriends. Most Trump supporters knew that they knew Trump's reputation, his involvement with beautiful women throughout his career, his infidelities. Like many powerful men, like many celebrities, just like your typical rock star, they are surrounded by women. Women love being around Donald Trump. He has everything they want, He has charm, he has looks, he has money. He can show any woman a good time, a really good time. He can take her places that she would never have been able to go if she were not on the arm of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump has become a kind of a, before he got into politics, he was already very well known, and as a man about town. I mean, here he is in Manhattan, born and raised in that area from Queens, the neighborhood, a neighborhood boy, who made good and became very wealthy. He's a real estate developer in New York City, in Manhattan, very tough, very high stakes environment, with some of the sharpest people probably on the planet living in Manhattan. I mean, not just anybody can make it and be really a success. No, if you're a dummy, you're really not going to be able to, you're not going to survive, because there are a bunch of sharks in New York City. And they're going to eat up the small fish, that's for sure. So Trump is a player. He's been a player his whole life. And he brings all that real estate business acumen to the office. And that's how he looks at the United States. That's how he looks at the whole world. That's what his expertise is. He knows that there are times when you want to smooth with people, you want to flatter them, You want to compliment them. There are other times when you have to get really tough. And he's done both that. When you look at what he's done with North Korea. I mean, he's taken the situation in North Korea farther than any other president ever has, by far. By a mile, he is ahead of other American presidents in the accomplishments that he has made in cooling down the situation, which is North and South Korea have been at war, basically at war. They have an armistice, but never a peace declaration. Since the early 1950s. And no one has really known what to do. And then you have people like Bill Clinton and others who actually aided North Korea to gain technology, weaponry, high-tech weaponry. Maybe they sold it to them, I don't know, like Hillary Clinton selling like 20% of America's uranium to Russia and profiting handsomely on that. You know, blatantly criminal activity. But anyway, that's a different story. But Trump looked at Kim Jong-un as a customer, as a competitor, as a colleague in the world of high-stakes business. And so he approached him in that way. So you show your opponent some respect, you give him some love, you get tough with him to show that you mean business and that you're willing to walk away and nobody's going to push you around. And these are all ploys. I mean, calling him Little Rocket Man. The media were absolutely flabbergasted and talked about they talked about how Trump wanted to go to war with North Korea because he called him Little Rocket Man and threatened him. And they made fun of Trump. They mocked Trump because he was so tough with Kim Jong-un. They thought there's going to be a nuclear war. I mean, they were saying there's going to be a nuclear war for sure. He's going to press the button. The man is out of control. He's insane. He's incompetent. You know, they even went so far as to say that Trump is measuring the length of their manly member with Kim Jong-un and saying his is bigger. They're talking about the size of the button. Because Kim Jong-un said, we're going to blow you up. We have nuclear missiles. And Trump says, well, but my button is a lot bigger than your button. And of course, the media just went with this, and they said, oh, how immature. Well, guess what? I think Trump understands that Kim Jong-un is just a young man, very young leader. And he is probably kind of immature. And it's an immature statement to say, we're going to blow you up, we're going to destroy you. You know, because, so Trump says, yeah, but we're going to destroy you worse. So it's like two kids on a playground threatening each other. And I think Trump understands this. But here's the kicker. After attempting to denigrate Trump to such an extent for being tough on Kim Jong-un, within a matter of months, probably because Kim Jong-un came around and said, you know, backed off, then all of a sudden Trump turns into Mr. Nice Guy. And he says, you know, I love, he goes and they meet, and, you know, Trump says nice things about him. talks about how beautiful his beaches are, how they would make great place for condos. You could make, put in big 5-star hotels here. You could make a lot of money. He tells Kim Jong-un, think of your country as real estate. Think what you could do if we got rid of this military standing, and you made your country open for business. And what did the media do? They went ballistic because they said Trump was being too nice to a dictator. Oh, how dare he compliment that murderous, brutal dictator. That dictator who threatened South Korea and threatened Japan and threatened the United States with nuclear annihilation. So you see that the true goal of the media is not to have peace in North Korea and South Korea and resolve an issue that's been an impediment to peace in that world and stability and good relations, political relations, diplomatic relations between the various countries for multi-decades. 70 years, almost 70 years, 65 years or so, it's been that way. But that doesn't matter to the mainstream media because it's just another way that they can attack Trump. In other words, no matter what Trump does, the mainstream media despises him for it. And it's not because it's not because they despise him for what he does, it's because they just simply despise him. And they feel that he somehow cheated, that he wasn't supposed to have won the election, that he didn't really win the election, and that Russia did it. Russia changed the votes, meddled in the American election because they wanted Trump to be in office. But then Trump gets in office, and what does he do? He makes some of the toughest sanctions on Russia that any president has done since the Cold War. But he also tries to make a deal with Russia because that's what you do. You get a position of strength, you really, really put the pressure on, so you dominate. Then you say, look, if you don't want if you don't want me to hurt you, if you want me to stop hurting you, then we can talk. Maybe we can make some kind of a deal. And sure, I'll stop hurting you if you're willing to sit down and talk. What motivation does Putin have to sit down and talk with a foreign leader like Trump if there is no pressure on him to do so? What does he have to gain? So we have to see that these are very emotional issues. And the emotionality of the hatred for Trump colors the opinions and the thinking processes of his opponents. They're not being logical, rational people. They're not seeing that Trump has actually done a lot of good for this country in the very short time that he's been in office. We look at the numbers, and you really have to look at the numbers. Over 4% growth, lowest unemployment in quite a number of years. For Hispanics and people of color, the lowest unemployment in an amazingly long time. When Trump started to put tariffs on China, the mainstream media said that it would be a catastrophe, and he also put it on other countries too, various tariffs. He put tariffs on countries that he feels were robbing us by using unfair trade practices against us. We would have no tariffs, they would have tariffs. And that hurts American business. He also, he put up those trade barriers, which is not something that's new. It's been done before. And it was gloom and doom, it was apocalypse, it was catastrophe as far as the mainstream media goes. But it doesn't matter what he does. If he didn't do anything, they would say he's awful, he doesn't do anything. I mean, what has he done? They would be screaming to high heaven if Trump were not fulfilling the campaign promises that he made to his constituents, to his supporters. You can take it to the bank that if he did nothing and he just played golf, that they would jump on that like a June bug, like a duck on a June bug, to use an old expression, to try to peel away the support that that got him elected in the first place. But they can't do that, because on issue after issue after issue, he has attempted, and in many cases he has succeeded in accomplishing the goals that he promised he would attempt to accomplish when he was running for president. And this is what we're seeing even to this very day. And it's absolutely amazing and actually quite funny to see the lengths that his opponents go to try to discredit him. Every possible way, as there is no high road, there is only the low road. I think they would take any road, the high road or the low road. They would do anything because they want him to be gone. They want him to vanish into the dustbin of history as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, they are basically hurting themselves. And this is something we're seeing in a lot of places in the world. It's all happening simultaneously. One of the reasons that Trump was elected is because of PC culture. Because Trump was not PC, and he deliberately was not PC, because he understood that that's what was required. He needed something to make him stand out. And he knew that not acting like a politician would help him get elected. So he deliberately says things that are shocking to his opponents. And it makes big headlines. And he did this during the campaign. And it makes the attention on Trump. And then if he makes a blunder, if he says something, then they ask him about it. And then he can say, well, what I really meant was, and then he explains what he really meant, and he wins from that too. Because, and people understand, people of discernment understand that very much of what the mainstream media does is they're looking for flaws. They're looking for verbal cues to gin up, to create a scandal, to create a mess. And I take the example of the notorious interview that he did about, I guess it's been about 12 or 13 years ago now, with a kind of a shock jock, I don't remember the name of the guy, about his life. and what it was like to be a celebrity. And they start talking about how women just run after you, and they will let you do anything that you want if you're a celebrity. And they won't do anything. And they were kind of laughing about it and kind of just amazed, appalled that, that would even happen. And he said, yeah, they'll let you do anything you want. You can grab their blah, blah, blah. And this was, and I've heard the interview. I've heard exactly what he said. And from that statement came about a whole industry of propaganda about Trump's relationships with women. And the way it was spun was that these women didn't want him to do that, but he admitted he would do that. But that's not what he said at all, because they were specifically talking about how they would let you do that. They would be fine with that because they wanted to get close to him. And this is a typical groupie behavior. I mean, he's a rock star in his world. A TV celebrity, a real estate celebrity, a playboy, a high roller in New York City. So he's a star. And anybody who's ever been in a rock band, and even if it's not, a huge major rock band like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or one of these other bands like Tool or something, those guys will tell you, even if you're not those guys, then you still have groupies. I have a friend who's never been a big star, but he was in a band that would play. And if you're up on a stage and you're rocking it out on your guitar or singing or whatever you're doing or playing the drums, there are going to be girls in that audience who's going to be wanting to have sex with you. That's what he told me. That's what my friend told me. Because that, just being up there, that's very attractive. Women are attracted to men who project confidence and sexuality, and they want to be around that. They like that. Okay, not all women, but some women. And so this is Trump's personality, and most of the people who voted for him knew this already. They learned that pretty quick. I mean, it's not very difficult to figure it out about who he was, the type of person he was. Like many other celebrities, it is not at all unusual. In fact, the Me Too movement is somewhat started by Trump because of this campaign. It's like, we got to get Trump, and we can get him with these women. What did he do? Well, against women. Well, I haven't seen anything that he's done against women that was not completely consensual. Even the Stormy Daniels, and I saw the interview with her, she said it was absolutely consensual on both parts. They had sex one time. This is out of her own mouth. Now, Trump claims that they didn't have sex. But I'm not even sure how it works with these very, very wealthy men. I think that sometimes you have people who want to get close to them and blackmail them. I think maybe blackmail is something that people have to deal with a lot when you're that rich, when you have that level of wealth. And sometimes, it's completely, they've really got something on you. And I remember that very famous scene in Godfather 2, when the Godfather, who's at kind of the top of his game, decides that he's going to compromise a sitting elected official like a senator or congressman or something, who's really against him and wants to do investigations of the mafia and all this. And they set it up where they put him in a compromising position. And it's a horrible scene. The guy is with a prostitute and falls asleep, and he wakes up and she's dead. And of course, it's a setup. And the mafia, this is just a horrible thing that they did, but they did it to blackmail him, to control him. They own him from that moment on. Then they show a scene where that same guy who was against the mafia, the Godfather people, is now for them in Congress, and they show the hearings and so on. And we go, oh, that's only a movie. Well, no, it's not just only a movie. This type of thing does happen. And blackmail and control by nefarious organizations of our elected officials is a huge issue. This is a huge issue. This is worldwide, not just in the United States. So, this is a world that I don't inhabit, and probably nobody else who's watching this broadcast inhabits. And it's almost unthinkable. It's almost inconceivable that a world like that could exist. So vicious, so selfish, so deadly, so dangerous, so risky. That high-stakes world where you never know what someone's real motivation is, what their real agenda is. What do they may be the nicest person in the world, but what do they really want? And it's an ugly and a dirty world. And it's certainly not a world I would want to live in. But some people seem to thrive in it. They're okay with it, I guess. And Trump seems to be just a natural inhabitant of that world. And I think in that sense, he probably has a leg up on a lot of the professional congressmen and congresswomen and the senators and the other elected officials, because they only have seen that world. They haven't seen a very difficult and dangerous world that's not that world, but similar. So in a way, he's learning about both worlds. Now, whether or not he will survive out his whole 4 years, that's another question. I think there's no question at all that if the Democrats get the House of Representatives, they will certainly make an attempt to impeach him. Although I've been hearing people like Nancy Pelosi say that they don't want to go there. And I read an article that a lot of Democrats, if you really get down to it, are questioning whether it's a good idea to try to impeach Trump. First of all, what are they going to impeach him on? That's a pretty big question. So far, it seems like it's about the hush money for the girlfriends. But that all happened before he got into politics, before he became president. They're trying to get people like Cohen, Manafort, to somehow come up with damning information and evidence of a crime against Trump And it looks like, so far, from what I can see, it's not enough. And now maybe Mueller has something that will absolutely devastate Trump, and it'll be the end of his presidency. They'll impeach him. Remember, they can't indict a sitting president. First, they have to impeach him. Then they can indict him. And the reason why they can't indict a sitting president is because the people elected him. And that would overthrow the democracy. So the framers, in their wisdom with the Constitution, they instituted the impeachment process, which is a way of getting him out of office with the will of the representatives of the people getting together and in a big majority voting to impeach him. No impeachment has actually happened. I mean, they have attempted to impeach, but I mean, they have impeached. You can impeach someone, but then you have to vote on it and decide whether, he's innocent or guilty. And if he's guilty, he has to leave the president. No president has ever been thrown out of office through that process. Now, we had Nixon, who resigned in order to avoid impeachment. Would Trump resign? I don't think so. Because for what reason? And why should he? He may not even run for a second term because of his age, or he may feel like he's done what he came to office to do. After the election in November, we're going to see a change, I believe, unless the Democrats really sweep through the House and pick up really a lot of seats. And they can do major wins throughout the country and sort of undermine Trump's support. So it'll appear that the American people are no longer with Trump. I think that Trump is going to make some very strong moves after the election, because that's a confirmation. If it does not turn against him in the election in November, then it will be a confirmation that he has the support of the American people. The only reason why Trump is as confident as he is because he feels that he has the support of the American people, of a majority of the American people. Enough to get him reelected, if he wants to be reelected. Most of the Republicans have decided that Trump is a winner, and they're going to go with him, and they're going to, rather than try to run as a Republican who's against him, they're seeing that those who have tried to run against him are not even getting their status as a candidate confirmed or reaffirmed as an incumbent. And so they're being unseated, some of these guys, by people who are more gung-ho Trump. And that tells you that for now, the American people are willing to give Trump a try and look at his policies. And so far, many of the Trump supporters, they're pretty happy with the way things have gone. Again, it seems to be the wall that's the sticking point. But it's possible that, I think likely, that after the November election, you will see more support for a stronger border. And it's partly because the stronger border is not just happening in the United States, it's a worldwide phenomenon. There's a strengthening of nationalism and an understanding that unfettered illegal immigration is a detriment to the welfare and the security of a nation. Now, this is where the Democrats are really going off the rails, because they are doubling down on their policy of open borders. Before a few months ago, Democrats were not coming out and saying openly, we're for getting rid of the borders. They would sort of prevaricate around it, hem and haw, and not really go there. But now they're going there. They're openly advocating for open borders. Allow them to flood in. There are literally millions of people who want to get to the United States from around the world, from China, from Africa, from Asia, from South America, from Central America, from everywhere where there is political instability, there is tremendous poverty, war, and all the suffering that's taking place in so many countries. They see America as a beacon of prosperity, stability, peace, and opportunity to make themselves a better life. And my friends on the left say, look, the United States is prosperous. We're doing quite well. It's time to change capitalism, get rid of capitalism, and institute socialism, since we're doing so well. And we can do something to help the poor people because of our prosperity. But the problem with that is that the reason why we're so prosperous is because people have the sense that if I go to America, I have a chance, I have an opportunity. It's the land of opportunity. That's what it's known as, America. I can be free. No one is going to come in and break up my business and rape my wife or my daughter and force my son into a gang. No one's going to rob me. No one's going to work. Their rule of law is established in the United States. They have a good system. I can prosper there. They're saying, look at this, the corporate taxes are really low in America, especially since Trump lowered the corporate taxes. And so what you have is people coming to the United States and saying, well, why would I want a socialist system that has very, very high taxes to pay for all these people who are not really contributing to the system and really can't. There are no jobs for them unless you somehow create your own job. But the system that we have is what made us prosperous, is the freedom that we have, the free speech. And there's so many powerful leftist forces trying to shut down free speech. But this is one of the main reasons why immigrants, both legal and illegal, come to the United States. Because I've spoken with some of them myself. And you hear them speak about it. They say, oh, I love America's freedom. That's why I want to get here. I feel so safe here. But so why would the left wing, and this is the Democrats, who are utterly losing their minds because of Trump, because Trump says what he thinks. I mean, they're saying, we've got to get rid of capitalism. This Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is completely out in left field. I mean, she is way out there. She's so far out that she's just weird. I mean, she wants to abolish capitalism. She says capitalism has been around, I heard her say this, for a long time, and it needs to go. We need to try socialism. Well, why would you want to get rid of a system that works so well? It's the default system. We've seen it happen over and over and over. People institute this highly intellectualized, command and control, very highly structured system that takes an enormous governmental apparatus in order to operate. Because everything is controlled in a socialist country. I mean, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, that's called the USSR. Yes, everybody worked, but you didn't necessarily get a choice where you were going to work. You had to be selected, and the government would decide where you're going to work and what you're going to do and how much you'll get paid. And you had price controls on your production. Let's say you made food. Well, they had the government stores that would sell your food at a price that was set by the government. That was not set by the marketplace. So if you made the best bread in the world that everybody wanted, it wouldn't cost any more than the piece of junk loaf of bread that some other baker made at a different store, maybe both run by the government. It wouldn't make any difference. So what's the incentive to go that little extra effort to make a really delicious, really nutritious loaf of bread? You don't get any reward for it because the price is set by the government. So what's the incentive? So in other words, you don't get the variety, you don't get the choices, you stop trying to figure out a way to make a new pastry or something really amazing that people would really like because there's no incentive. Because people have got to buy bread in order to live. And no matter what you do to make it nicer, it's not going to make any difference. You're not going to get anything out of it because everything is run by the state. And the state has an idea that, well, look, people need bread. That's as far as they go. Okay, we'll make sure they can afford to get bread. We'll keep it at this really low price because we want everybody to be the same. But even in Russia, and the same thing in Cuba and other socialist countries, they would have stores that the members of the inner Communist Party would be allowed to shop in. Only them. The ordinary people were not allowed to shop there. In those stores, and the tourists could go there, like in Cuba, in different places, and you could pay a lot more for an item, but it's a much more quality item. So you get a two-tiered system. You get the system that is available for the inner party members who become an elite group. And then you get the system for everybody else, which is kind of shoddy and kind of just getting by with the minimum of the quality. The quality is pretty bad. The clothes are not as good, the food isn't as good, the cars aren't as good that are made by the state-run company. Whereas the elites, they get their Mercedes, they get their top quality cars. They get better housing. Why? Because they're in the inner party. They can do that. They have the power to do that. And you see that the system just becomes another form of tyranny. And that's all it is. The Soviet Union was a left-wing socialist society. Cuba is a left-wing socialist society. Venezuela is a left-wing socialist society. And you see what's happening in Venezuela right now. South Africa is a left-wing socialist society. and many, many other countries around the world, China. In order to survive, China brought in capitalism. They saw the fall of the Soviet Union. They said, we don't want that to happen to us. We've got to bring in capitalism. And they allowed capitalism in, and that was the only way the communists could survive. The communists still they rule China. And believe me, those party members are doing quite well. They're benefiting from the introduction of capitalism into China. So for the idea of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to say that we've got to get rid of capitalism in the United States is completely deluded. And, these people make up things. They pretend that I'm a man of the people, I'm a woman of the people. They make up things. They just lie. And then it turns out that the Marxist playbook involves lying. You've got to lie to the people. This is Marx. This is the typical socialist, the typical communist. Lying is completely okay. And now we have a system in the United States, a new law that says that it's okay for the United States to lie to the American people. In other words, the information that you're getting from the government, it's okay to be a lie. And this is why the establishment hates Trump so much, is because Trump is not part of them. He's the wrong guy. He's an interloper. He was not the guy that they had all planned to be in there. It was going to be Hillary. She was completely part of the machine. And it was going to roll smoothly forward, gradually destroying capitalism and bringing in a communist state, a socialist state. Whether you want to call it communism or socialist. The Soviets called themselves socialists. The Nazis called themselves socialists, national socialists. The Chinese call themselves socialists. The Cubans call themselves socialists. The Nicaraguans call themselves socialists. The Venezuelans call themselves socialists. The word communism was a deprecatory term introduced or brought up out of history to label them and make a difference between socialism and communism. But really, true socialism is not any different than communism. And we can say, well, what about Sweden? What about Denmark? Well, those are not socialist states. They are capitalist states with socialist programs. Not all the businesses in Sweden or Denmark or another left-wing country, the Netherlands, there are plenty of big privately run companies and small ones. What happens in socialism is basically the major corporations blend and they become the government. And so they nationalize companies that are private, and they fold them into the government. So it's massive control by a very few people, just a very small group at the top, who own everything and run everything. And they claim that, oh, the people own it, but the people don't own it. They're not getting the benefits from it. They're getting the dribs and drabs of the benefits, of the wealth. They lose their power, they lose their civil rights, dissidents are persecuted. And right now we have a situation in this country where the media, the universities, the corporations are left-wing, and they're trying desperately to get rid of Trump. Because once they get rid of him, they can take over completely. They can completely destroy all opposition. That's the point. But we need a balance. You need both sides. You can never allow one side to completely destroy the other side. So I would not advocate for getting rid of leftists. Everybody's voice has to be heard. And what we're seeing is censorship on a massive scale of conservatives right now in this country. This is extremely dangerous for the Constitution and the democracy and the future of the Republic. So we have to keep this in mind when we think about who we're going to vote for during that upcoming election. So that's all for today. Have a great evening and sleep well.